Hello everybody, welcome to Snyder's Inc. and today we got a top 15 I'm gonna comment on one of my videos. I appreciate the comment. We got top 15 as top 15 strange unsolved mysteries that will haunt you. And we gonna get right into this. I need y'all to hit the like button, hit subscribe button, comment what you think down below. Let's go.
Number 15. Asha Degree. The case of 9-year-old Asha Degree and her mysterious disappearance has been unsolved for 23 years, leading investigators and the public to wonder what could have happened to the 9-year-old when she disappeared in the dark of the night. Asha Degree was a shy, cautious child who loved one's...
Okay, when they said Asha Degree, I did not think the name of her would actually be there's no way this is her actual spelling. You cannot tell me her name, last name is actually Degree like this. I'm not even making fun of. When you say Asha Degree, I just would not have thought this is how you actually spell her. Like Degree is how you actually spell her name.
Preferred to keep to herself. She attended Falston Elementary School in Shelby, North Carolina. Okay. On Friday, February 11th, 2000, 9-year-old Asha's school was closed. She and her 10-year-old brother O'Brien stayed nearby at an aunt's house while their parents worked. They both headed to basketball practice that afternoon at their school. The following day, Asha's team played their first game of the season. Asha was the team's star point guard but ended up fouling out of the game, which her team ultimately lost. Her family recalled that she was pretty upset about the loss, and she and some of her teammates were crying after the game. However, her brother's team played afterward, and by the time it was time to cheer him on, her mood seemed to have improved. The day after the games, Asha and O'Brien went to church from a relative's house and then returned home to spend time with their parents, Harold and Aquila, who were preparing to celebrate their wedding anniversary the following day, Valentine's Day. Around 8 p.m., Asha and O'Brien went to their shared bedroom to call it a night before waking up for school the next morning. Between 9 p.m. and midnight that night, the power in the area went out after a car crashed into a nearby power line and cut the power in the neighborhood.
So she escaped during a blackout because a stupid driver drove it to a power line. Brilliant. It's genius we got going on here.
Neighborhood. Shortly after midnight, the power came back on. Harold recalled checking on his children around that time and seeing them both sleeping soundly in their beds. Around 2:30 a.m., Harold checked in on both his kids once again and recalls that they were sound asleep, just as before. Shortly afterwards, O'Brien heard his sister's bed frame squeak, but he assumed that she was simply turning over in her sleep and ignored the sound. The following morning at 5:45 a.m., Aquila woke up and around 6:30 went into the kids' room to wake them and get them ready for school. O'Brien was there in his bed, but Asha was missing. After checking around the house and the yard, the family called relatives to see if she had wandered over to one of their homes.
That is insane. Can you imagine? You wake up to go. You go to wake your kids up, and one of your kids is gone. At like 5:30, so like and you remember checking on them within 2:30 at night. 2:30 in the morning, you wake up, and you go, 2:30 in the morning, you check on them, and they're there. By 5:45, when you go to wake them up, one of them is gone. So it means within the 2-3 hour time frame, they snuck out or got taken. And you don't know which one, because she's 9 years old, right? So at that point, you can't rule out the other. You can't rule out either one. That would be terrifying as a parent. As a parent, that would be so scary. You wouldn't know what to do. You wouldn't know how to think. You wouldn't know who to call. You're calling every single human. You're calling every human being you know. You're calling people that don't even know who the child is, just to see if they've seen the child.
But no one had seen her. All the doors in the house were locked. During their search, Asha's family realized that some of her belongings had gone missing as well. It seemed as though Asha had packed a book bag with clothes and personal items and left the house sometime in the early hours of the morning. Asha's parents quickly reported her disappearance to the police.
What a weird thing. Like, I'm just trying to think, what would a 9-year-old leave for? Because she couldn't have been so upset about a basketball game that she ran away from her family for 23 years. That doesn't sound right. There's some more to that. There is something up there. I just can't figure out what it is. But there's something that is not being brought up, I feel.
Who came to assist in the search for the young girl. There was no apparent disturbance in the home. None of the doors or windows were forced or broken open, and nothing seemed to be in disarray. They quickly alerted the community about the missing 9-year-old, and some strange reports started to come in. 2 motorists claimed that they saw Asha walking along Highway 18 between 3:45 and 4:15 on Monday morning, shortly after she disappeared. They described her as wearing a long-sleeved white t-shirt and white pants. It was a rainy night, and one of the motorists said that he circled his car back around because he thought it was strange for such a young girl to be out so late on her own, only to see her run into the woods as though to hide from him. However, he and the other motorist only reported their sightings after her disappearance was reported in the media several days later.
In defense, right? In defense of her, right? If I was a young woman and I'm walking the street at night and a car drives by me, then does a U-turn, oh, I'm running the forest too. Yeah, you're gonna run the forest because you don't want to be. She has a plan. She kidnapped is not part of her plan. She does not want to be actually kidnapped, so she's running to the forest. And it's probably when she ran in that something went wrong. I feel like that forest needs to be checked way extremely well.
Investigators find these witness reports credible because they align with what Asha was thought to be wearing, and they spotted the girl in close to the same spot and headed in the same direction. Just one day after Asha disappeared, some of her items were found on the ground in a tool shed just off of Highway 18. Candy wrappers, a green marker, a pencil, and a yellow hair bow that was identified as belonging to Asha were found. There was also a photograph of a young girl around Asha's age found, a photograph which has not been identified to this day. Since the original
So my guess is she ran away, then got kidnapped, and probably killed. Which is insane to think. But it's why you can't run away. Like, you don't run away, especially if you're 9 years old. Don't be running away, that's dangerous. You are playing a dangerous game. If you don't have a intended destination, you're gonna end up in a situation you wish you weren't in. Which is what happened here. It's just unfortunate that there's been no closure for 23 years.
Original investigation, other sightings have been reported. In 2016, a reinvestigation into the case revealed that Asha may have been seen getting into a 1970s Lincoln Continental Mark IV or a rusty Ford Thunderbird, but nothing has been confirmed. Asha's case still remains open, and it is still unknown what happened to her that night. Some believe Asha walked away on her own. Others believe she may have been lured away. Either way, her loved ones will not rest until her mystery is solved. If you have any...
I bet you it's both. I bet she went away on her own, but then got lured into her... So I said her demise. That's what I think happened here.
Any information about this case, please call the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office at 704-484-4822 or the FBI at 704-672-6100. Number 14. Brian Schaffer. Brian Schaffer has been missing for
There's another one I know. I feel like I'm gonna know most of these. This is the guy... Is this the guy who... Oh, I'm trying to remember because I'm stuck between two. Is this the guy who was drove in a car and got caught, like called his family, or called one member of his family, and was on the phone, and then when they went to go pick him up, he was never seen again? Or is this the guy who disappeared into a fucking in a bar and was never seen again? Which one's he?
17 years after the events of one mysterious night, investigators continue to look for leads wherever they might find them. But to some, it seems as though the young man vanished off the face of the earth. Born to Randy and Renee Schaffer on February 25, 1979 in Pickerington, Ohio, by 2006, Brian Schaffer was a medical student at Ohio State University. He had a younger brother named Derek who describes him as free-spirited, intelligent, and a jokester. Brian grew up very close to his mother, a nurse, who was the original inspiration for his medical career. After graduating from Ohio State University in 2003, he took some time off to work as a radiology tech assistant at the University Hospital. It wasn't long before Brian made up his mind to return to school to continue his study in the field of medicine. In August of 2004, Brian began attending Ohio State University's College of Medicine. It was around this time that he began dating one of his fellow medical students, Alexis Wagoner. They had only been dating for a couple of months when his friends started to notice the relationship was becoming quite serious. His family was hopeful he would soon propose to Alexis, and even encouraged Brian to do so. But in 2005, Brian's mother Renee was diagnosed with a type of cancer known as myelodysplasia, and she passed away only...
I've never heard that type of cancer. I'm not saying I don't know much about it. I don't know how deadly it is, but since she passed away from it, I'm gonna assume she was pretty damn tough, and then I'm gonna assume that if your family died unexpectedly from cancer, you probably would take a toll on you. It would. I had a grandma who died unexpectedly from a brain, I think it was a brain tumor or something wrong with her brain, and none of us kids knew about it. None of my brothers did, none of my sisters did. I don't even know if my mom did. I just knew like one I just know she passed away unexpectedly because the night that happened plays in my head. I won't go into details on that because that's a whole another topic. But yeah, it's a very tough. It can be tough to lose someone unexpectedly.
Only 1 year later, in March of 2006. In the weeks following, Brian struggled to get back into routine and was dealing with a significant amount of grief. He often asked his girlfriend to run away with him, though she always took these statements to be simple fantasies, not meant to be taken seriously. Brian also told his girlfriend at one point that she should move on and find someone else because he was going into a dark place emotionally that he wasn't sure he could come out of. Alexis knew he was experiencing a difficult time following his mother's death and refused to leave him alone with his grief. They continued to plan a trip to Miami for that April, a trip which had been Brian's mother's final gift to him. On March 31st, 2006, the first night of his break, Brian went out to dinner with his father. The family was allegedly dealing with some tension surrounding Renee's life insurance policy. It was rumored at this time that Brian's father was planning to cut him off financially, even though his mother had supported him throughout college. So Brian was facing financial concern.
Ooh, yeah, that's gonna cause tension. If your father is gonna cut you off financially when your mom would support you, that would cause some issues definitely.
About how he was going to continue to pay for medical school as well as dealing with his own grief. After having dinner with his father, Brian met up with his friend William. They went for a drink before deciding to call their friend Meredith to join them. Meredith picked the two men up and they went bar hopping, eventually landing at a local bar called the Ugly Tuna Saloona.
It is the guy who disappeared in a bar. It is the guy who disappeared in a bar. I didn't know which one. The names don't sound familiar, but I knew he was either the guy in the bar or the guy who drove and had a weird phone call and all that. He was the guy in the bar who enters a bar but never leaves the bar, and no one knows how he got out.
Around 10 p.m., Brian called Alexis, who was in Toledo visiting family, to tell her he loved her and confirm their travel plans for the following week to Miami. Apparently, not long after hanging up, Brian and William had an argument at the bar, the subject of which has never been publicly discussed, and Brian walked off. Around 2 o'clock that morning, Meredith noticed she hadn't seen Brian in a while, and quickly scanned the bar for him. Neither Meredith nor William could find him anywhere in the bar, and he didn't answer any calls to his phone. They eventually left the bar without him, assuming he chose to walk home alone. The next morning, none of Brian's friends checked in with him. He wasn't reported as missing until he didn't show up to meet Alexis at the airport that Monday. Surprised that he would not meet at the agreed-upon time, Alexis quickly reported him missing. The local police searched nearby.
So there's a cut. I had to go to the bathroom. Let's go.
Hotels, bars, and even dumpsters in an effort to find Brian, but there was no evidence of him anywhere. The only footage of Brian from the evening he disappeared is the camera outside the Ugly Tuna Saloona just before 2 a.m., where he speaks to 2 women before heading back inside. Since then, no one has seen or heard from Brian Schaffer. No evidence has shown any foul play within the restaurant, and the camera never shows him leaving that night, despite it being the only publicly accessible entrance to the venue. Did something go wrong inside, or did Brian find a way out where the cameras couldn't see him? If you have any information about his whereabouts...
Imagine he's like stuck in the wall. Something like that. Like got caught, like there's an opening in the wall, a hole, and he crawled through it or some weird thing like that. No one even realizes it.
Please call the Columbus Police Department at 614-645-4545. Number 13, Rebecca Collim. Rebecca Collim's disappearance is a haunting story of a young woman who went missing from a public place without leaving a trace. Even with so many people around who could have witnessed the events of her final day, no one has been able to determine...
Oh, she's the cruise ship one. She's the one that there was a lot of people who think there was foul play here. And there was a lot of reasons why you can think that, more than there is reasons you can't.
And exactly what happened to her, and her case has remained unsolved for more than 12 years. Born on March 11, 1987, in Chester, England, Rebecca Collim was one of 4 children. She loved the outdoors and was always looking for adventure. She worked at a zoo as a teenager and later joined the British Army Cadets, but knew that she was looking for something different as she entered adulthood. She studied sports science in school and taught at a camp in the United States, eventually realizing she wanted to see more of the world. It was for this reason that Rebecca jumped at the chance to travel to London to interview for the Disney Cruise Line. Loved ones said that this was a dream job for Rebecca.
I would love to work on a cruise line, although this story makes me a reason why I don't want to. I would love to learn a cruise because I'm a man who wants to travel. I want to travel to different places and see different places and see the world and see different but I don't want to do it, I don't want to go to a cruise ship where the possibility of me getting thrown off is a thing. That ain't happening.
Rebecca, wherein she could travel the world and continue working with youth, which she loved. She was flown out to Disney's Florida theme park for training and began her journey as a youth counselor on the cruise line. Rebecca spent her first 4 months traveling to and from the Bahamas on the cruise before getting her first 2 months off, which she spent back in Britain. She enjoyed the work and the young people she worked with spoke highly of her. She was described by co-workers as cheerful and outgoing. They reported that she got along well with employees and passengers alike. Just 6 weeks after she returned aboard the Disney Wonder, on March 22, 2011, Rebecca disappeared. The boat was sailing to one of its ports along the coast of Mexico. Rebecca sent her mother a message via Facebook, letting her know that she would call once they docked in the port. CCTV footage showed Rebecca in a staff area speaking to someone on the phone. She appears visibly upset during the conversation. However, when approached by a colleague who asks if she is all right, she answers, "Yeah, fine," before ending the call. She then walks off.
I have a weird feeling it's probably... Does she have a boyfriend? Does she have a lover? That type of thing that would happen if a lover's spouse happened. Because you wouldn't want to make that public. You don't want that publicly known. So you just go, "Yeah, I'm fine," and then just hang it up. That's what my assumption was. That's my assumption.
And is not seen again. After the call, Rebecca failed to show up for her shift. This was unlike her, and her colleagues began to grow worried. In addition, her mother started to become concerned when she had not reached out after saying she would once the ship reached port. Crew members searched the ship for Rachel but found no sign. Almost immediately, the ship notified the U.S. Coast Guard and Bahamian authorities as the ship was registered to the Bahamas, thinking there was a chance that Rebecca had gone overboard. Despite an intensive search, no trace of Rebecca was even found. There are a number of questions about the circumstances surrounding her disappearance. Many assume that she went overboard and disappeared into the waves, but was it of her own accord? Was it an accident? Or could there have been foul play involved? The case garnered significant media attention. Not only did Rebecca disappear aboard an idyllic, family-friendly Disney cruise liner, Rebecca's parents strongly advocated for more investigation into her case. The case also revealed to the public some concerns about the way cruise liners are held accountable, or not, for their staff members. Rebecca was not the first or last person to go missing on a...
How does 400 people go missing? See, this thing says, well, there's no cause for general alarm. 400 people should not go missing on a cruise ship, in general. That many people should not go missing. You are going to get a case of it happening, once in a while. 400 people, I'm sorry, even though it's in 20 years, that's still a lot of people. That's still more people that probably should go missing.
a boat full of vacationers, and many criticize the way investigations are conducted on board these vessels.
No.
If you have any information about Rebecca's case...
Yeah, because they just probably take it as she went overboard, probably an accident. Let's call it a day.
...case or current whereabouts, please contact the Corium family at 07-747-359-968 or their media spokesman at 07-932-815-970. Number 12. Rico Harris. A tragic story of a role model with true potential, Rico Harris is a well-known name with a mysterious story. Missing for more than 8 years now, Rico's case brought on worldwide attention, but there has been no sign of him since the fall of 2014.
Okay.
Rico Harris was born on May 19, 1977, to Henry Harris, a former semi-professional basketball player, and Margaret Fernandez. Rico was the eldest of 4 children. Though some of the time Henry was a loving and hard-working father, he sometimes became violent and abusive. Eventually, Margaret took the children and left him, moving to Alhambra, California, where she had grown up. She worked full-time, and as the eldest child, Rico often took care of his younger siblings and helped to hold the family together. Despite the hardships, Rico showed glimpses of talent on the basketball court from a young age. Standing 6'9" when he was fully grown, many around him recognized his potential. Basketball became a refuge for Rico, offering an escape from the day-to-day. As he honed his skills, Rico's passion for the sport grew, and he began to dream of a future in professional basketball. As Rico grew older, he displayed a natural athletic ability. With his staggering height, he stood out on the basketball court even as a kid. He attended Alhambra High School, where he became a star player for the school's basketball team. Off the court, he was shy and not academically inclined. Though he worked hard to improve his GPA, an athletic scholarship offer from UCLA had to be rescinded after his poor performance on the SATs. He eventually wound up enrolling at Los Angeles City College and playing for their team, becoming the biggest star on their team. After completing college and bouncing around from team to team, but never quite making it out of the semi-professional leagues, Rico joined the Harlem Globetrotters, a team renowned for their showy performances, part sport and part theater. However, despite his success with them, he faced personal issues off the court. Rico grappled with substance abuse issues and felt the setbacks of it in both his professional and personal.
There was a lot of time when people who reach success go down that route. They go to substance. They feel like they have to do it. They have to be part of the popular person lifestyle. It's a shitty way to live your life. Don't put yourself in that peer pressure of just feel like you have to do, because you don't have to do anything. You don't have to take drugs. You don't have to drink alcohol. You don't have to do anything. Especially if you're not fully confident in yourself and being able to control it. Just you can't do it.
Life. About a month after he joined the team, he was out driving with his girlfriend when he got into a dispute with another car. After leaving his own car to confront them, he was hit in the back of the head with a baseball bat. Though he was able to get himself home after the incident, he started having headaches and trouble maintaining stability. He eventually had to retire from sports altogether at the age of just 24. He returned to live with his mother for a period of time where his substance use continued to get worse. Instead of just drinking, he began to use heroin, crack, and methamphetamine. Loved ones were worried about him and didn't know how to intervene. Eventually, after an overdose...
How do you not know how to intervene? You go over to this guy and say, you have some issues, you need rehab. That's how you intervene. You make him get into rehab. That is how you intervene. It's the only way you intervene. You can't wait for him to come to you when he needs help. He doesn't know.
Of prescription drugs, he made the decision to attend rehab. To get a fresh start and rebuild his life, Rico made the decision to move to Seattle, Washington. He had met a woman, Jennifer Song, who was living in Seattle and who he'd begun a romantic relationship with. He was hopeful that this would be the step that he needed to take to get away from his substance use issues and turn over a new leaf. During this new phase of his life, Rico planned a trip back to his hometown to visit his mother on her birthday. According to his girlfriend, Rico was hoping to get some closure from her and discuss some of their past conflicts. Rico had a brief visit with his family. He took his brother out to eat and gifted him a new phone, then went to visit his mother to speak with her in private. Loved ones say that they don't think that conversation went as he expected or hoped it might. Shortly after midnight, Rico left to go back to Seattle since he had a job interview early the next morning. According to reports, Rico drove north on Interstate 5 and stopped at Lodi, about 40 miles south of Sacramento, to refuel his car. At 10:45 a.m. on October 10th, he called his girlfriend Jennifer from his car and left her a message that said he was going to go up into the mountains to have a rest, since he was worn out from the long drive. At 11:15 a.m., he turned off his phone. No one has heard from Rico since. Jennifer called Rico back when he failed to return home, but there was no answer. Jennifer and his friends decided to wait a few days to see if he would return later than expected, but they eventually reported him missing. A search began but brought no evidence. There were some reported sightings of Rico, but none have been confirmed. His car was eventually found, but Rico was not inside, and there was no evidence that pointed investigators in a definitive direction. They later found his backpack by the side of the road, and his phone and charger were contained within. Despite extensive searches and efforts to uncover clues, Rico Harris's disappearance remains shrouded in uncertainty. If you have any information about Rico's disappearance or whereabouts, please contact the Yolo County Sheriff's Office at 530-668-5280. Number 11. Jennifer Kessie. Jennifer Kessie was a young, bright girl whose disappearance sent shockwaves through her family and community. There has been no closure in over a decade since her disappearance. Jennifer Kessie was born on May 20th, 1981, in Orlando, Florida. She graduated from the University of Central Florida with a degree in finance. At the time of her disappearance, Jennifer had recently purchased a condo in Orlando and was just beginning to create the life she had always dreamed of. She was working as a finance manager in the Central Florida Investments timeshare company and was dating a man named Rob Allen who lived in Fort Lauderdale, about 3 hours away from her. They had vacationed together in the Virgin Islands in early January 2006, and Jennifer had spent the night of Sunday, January 21st at his house, before driving straight to work the following morning. Jennifer left work around 6 p.m. and called her father on her drive home. Around 10 o'clock that night, Jennifer called Rob to say goodnight. The following morning, Rob was expecting a call from his girlfriend. She usually called him just before heading to work, something he had come to expect as routine. But this morning, Rob didn't hear from her as expected. He attempted to reach her, but each call went straight to her voicemail. Jennifer didn't show up to work that Tuesday morning. Her bosses didn't hesitate to contact her family since not showing up was very out of the ordinary for her. Jennifer's parents immediately drove out to her house to check in on her. Upon arrival, they realized her car was not there, but nothing looked out of the ordinary inside her apartment. Inside Jennifer's home, there was a wet towel and some clothes that suggested she had showered and gotten ready for work just like any other morning. Still, no one could contact her, so her family printed flyers and had friends spread out among the city in an attempt to find anyone who may have seen her that morning. Search parties took place on foot as well as by boat, car, helicopter, and even ATV. On Tuesday, theories surfaced that she may have been abducted when walking to her car Monday morning. Others believed she may have made it to her car and been abducted on her way to the office. On Thursday of the same week, a man called in after seeing Jennifer's story on the news and recognized her 2004 Chevy Malibu that investigators said to be on the lookout for. He claimed that the car had been abandoned out in front of his apartment for several days. Police arrived to examine the car and confirm it's Jennifer's, but found no evidence. Nearby security footage shows an unidentifiable person leaving Jennifer's car there and walking away. Though Jennifer's friends and family who have viewed the security tapes say they do not recognize the person who was driving Jennifer's car, none of the security footage shows the suspect's face. Not even the FBI could determine more distinguishing features about the suspect other than they stood about 5'3" to 5'5". Not even the person's gender is clear from the footage. In May of 2007, a $1 million reward was offered to anyone who could provide information that would lead to Jennifer being found alive. However, no evidence has since surfaced.
This is where my brain's been saying, how is there footage? No way you can discern how shitty are your security cameras? Your security cameras need to be fixed. That's what that is. That's what sign that is. If you have a security camera footage and someone walking by and you can't tell if it's a male or female, you need to get new cameras. That's what that says. Because your stupid ass can't figure out what the hell's going on here. Because how can you not tell a gender from a security footage? You should be able to, if your security footage makes sure you can't identify the gender of a person, you need new security footage. And you need security cameras and a new security system.
Surfaced. If you have any information that can help close Jennifer's case, please contact the Kessie Family Tip Line at 941-201-4009. Number 10. Tammy Lynn Leopard. A movie star turned major news story, Tammy Lynn Leopard was a Hollywood idol in the making until she disappeared. Her case shocked the entertainment industry and continues to stump investigators to this day. Tammy Lynn Leopard was born on February 5, 1965 in Rockledge, Florida. She was raised by her mother, Linda Curtis, a theater and modeling agent who encouraged Tammy in her career, even from a young age. Tammy was a strikingly beautiful girl. Her mother knew she had the looks to be a star, and by the age of just 4, Tammy was competing in and winning beauty contests.
I will say this, I do feel bad for children who are pushed into acting. If the child wants to do it, that's fine. But I do always have a little sympathy for children who are pushed into it by their family, because you might not know what their reasoning is. They might be like, hey, we just think you'll be good at this, but it might be, hey, you're our chance for us to get rich, so go do acting. You have to be very like, for the children, it's usually, the parents usually have something to gain more than the child does.
Competing in nearly 300 pageants by the time she turned 16, Tammy took home about 280 crowns. Tammy also grew up with Wing Flanagan, a close family friend who was like a brother to her. In the spring of 1982, at just 17 years old, Tammy landed her first major movie role in the hit film Spring Break. Once filming finished, Tammy went to an unchaperoned weekend party, but her loved ones report that the party changed her. Wing said that ever since the party she seemed extremely paranoid. Tammy would often tell her mother somebody was out to kill her, but she wouldn't share any details.
She got drugged. She got drugged in that party. She got drugged in that party, might have been assaulted, and probably had threats thrown against her. And all those things mixed together caused that. That's what happened. I guarantee you, because you don't just walk out of a party for no reason and end up being paranoid. The traumatic events is what caused her to be paranoid. That's my guess.
It's about why she thought so. Tammy was isolating herself, and neither her mom nor Wing knew why. They didn't have much time to wonder because soon, Tammy was given a part in the Al Pacino movie Scarface, which represented a major step in her career. Shooting began in March of 1983 in Miami, and Tammy moved there to stay with a family friend by the name of Walter Leibowitz. According to him, all was fine for a few days, until the director called him to say Tammy had a breakdown on set. During a scene in the movie involving a shooting, Tammy began crying uncontrollably and had to be escorted off the set. Tammy quit the movie and moved back into her mother's house. Now, she was convinced someone was trying to poison her. According to her mother, Tammy's moods were constantly oscillating between happy like her old self and withdrawn and paranoid. On July 1st of that year, Tammy seemed to have finally snapped. She smashed the windows of her mother's house and attacked Wing. This was the first time Linda really realized something was wrong.
That is a mental health issue that needs to be checked. When you're randomly smashing the windows of your family, of your mother's house, and attacking someone, that's when you need to, that's a mental health issue. A bad mental illness issue.
Wrong with her daughter, and she didn't know if she could offer the support she needed. Tammy's mother checked her into a mental hospital for a psychiatric evaluation, but Tammy was released after just 3 days, when the doctors found no reason to keep her. Her mother remained worried, but was reassured by the medical assessment that there was nothing seriously wrong with Tammy.
This is medical thing in what, 1980s? They didn't know how to really do medical assessments the way they do now, so they probably didn't even actually know what to look for. They just probably guessed. I don't think they actually knew what to look for mental illness-wise with this woman.
Shortly after her release, Tammy was picked up by a friend to go to the beach. According to the Florida Police Department, Tammy and her friend got into a verbal argument during their time together, and Tammy asked her friend to drop her off in Cocoa Beach. According to her friend, Tammy was dropped off about 5 miles from her house, barefoot and without a purse. The friend claims he thought Tammy would find another way home, but she never did. Tammy's mom waited.
Listen, I don't care what argument you're having. Don't ever just drop someone off at a beach and then just leave. Like, don't do that. Just don't. I don't care what argument you're having. That's just not the way to deal with that situation. Don't make it so there are, because that puts them in danger more than anything else. So yeah, don't do that.
waited for her to arrive, but eventually she was reported missing. Over the years, various tips and potential sightings have emerged, but none have resulted in locating Tammy or providing closure to her family. After her disappearance, detectives received 2 calls from a woman claiming Tammy was alive and would contact them when she was ready to do so. In the second call, the woman added that Tammy was going to school to be a nurse, which she had always wanted to do. The case remains one of Florida's most enduring unsolved mysteries, with loved ones and investigators alike haunted by the vanishing of a talented and troubled young starlet. If you have any information concerning Tammy Lynn, please call the Cocoa Beach Police Department at 321-868-3251. Number 9. Juan Pedro Martinez. Juan Pedro Martinez was 10 years old in the summer of 1986 when he disappeared. He was embarking on a road trip with his parents, Andres Martinez and Carmen Gomez. It was June 25th when they set off from Cartagena headed to Bilbao. Juan's father was a trucker who was transporting 20,000 liters of sulfuric acid between the two cities. Juan had accompanied his father on shorter trips before, and his father promised that he could come along on a longer delivery if he made good grades in school. This summer, Andres was making good on his promise. The trip through Spain's beautiful Basque region was filled with narrow mountain roads and single-lane streets. As they were going through the Somosierra mountain pass, even despite the sharp turns and clips, Andres was driving erratically, taking a mirror off one car as he passed it, and causing another to turn completely off the road. On one sharp turn, Andres was driving far too fast, and the truck tipped over, killing himself and his wife instantly. The smell covered the area as the sulfuric acid leaked out of the truck, causing small explosions as the chemicals spread. Nearby drivers reported the accident, and police quickly arrived on the scene. When they looked into the truck's cab to determine if there were any survivors, they found the bodies of Andres and Carmen, but Juan was nowhere to be found. When they found that the child was meant to be with his parents, they launched a search party in the area in an effort to find him. However, they were ultimately unsuccessful and found no evidence of the missing 10-year-old. There are a number of theories about what could.
This is interesting. So the child went with the parents to Spain, doing deliveries, but the parents end up driving erratically, crashing the car, killing them instantly in an explosion. The child isn't in the car and is just nowhere to be found. Interesting. I actually don't know how to explain what happened here. That's very bizarre. Like, did they get rid of the child? Did they kill the child and then cause a big accident? What happened here?
Could have happened to Juan, but nothing has ever been confirmed. Some believe Juan was killed in the crash, but he was never found on site.
No.
Others believe he was kidnapped or taken by traffickers, and some even believe he faked his death to create a new identity at just 10 years old. If you have any information,
that is you know what? If that was revealed, I would say this. That is mad respect. I'm not even joking. That is mad respect. If you can create a fake identity and start a new life at 10 years old and it works, freaking right on. That is a smart person, and none of us. That's things that it's hard for normal people to do.
Information about Juan's whereabouts, please contact the Central Office of Interpol Spain at 91-582-2966 or 91-582-2964. Number 8. Cape Intruder. Many horror fans are familiar with the sleepy Maine towns that make up the backdrop of countless Stephen King novels. The idyllic state might be a counterintuitive place to find real-life horror, but for the residents of Cape Elizabeth, that's just what they experienced. Cape Elizabeth is a picturesque town in Cumberland County, Maine. It has a small population of just under 10,000 residents. Close to the water and with a true small-town New England atmosphere, many families see it as an ideal place to raise their children. But for a brief period, residents of this small town were shaken by a series of terrifying events. In 2005, some residents began reporting waking up to an intruder standing over their bed in the dark of the night. As they awoke in sleepy confusion, they would quickly realize that the dark figure that had invaded their home was not a figment of their somnolent imagination. The man would leave quickly at the first sign his victim was awake, and some residents remained unsure if what they saw was real or a particularly vivid night terror. Dubbed the Cape Intruder.
Interesting. So this is a guy. This is weird. So this is not even a guy who's killing people. This is the guy who just goes in his house, watches you, and then once he gets the sense you're awake, he leaves. Yeah, that's weird. That's very weird.
None of his victims were ever harmed as far as the reports go. Homes were never robbed, items never went missing, and no evidence of other crimes was ever found. But still, the number of residents claiming to wake up to him continued to rise. It is thought the intruder would enter through unlocked front or back doors, since the small town was usually a very safe area, and residents often left their houses unlocked without fear.
Never would do that. I don't care how safe the neighborhood is. I will never unlock my door, leave any of my doors unlocked at night or even while I'm there. Nah, that's never happening.
Cape Intruder caused a stir in Cape Elizabeth for the better part of a year. Throughout the town, frightened people woke up to see him standing ominously over their beds, watching them sleep. Neighborhood watch groups were established, and victims put forward names of who they believed he might have been. Just as abruptly as the scare began, the sightings ended, with no reports of the Cape Intruder happening after February of 2006. Eyewitnesses were able to provide reports, and a police sketch artist drew up a photo of what he looked like, but no suspect was ever identified. Number 7. The Bowmont Children. The mystery of the Bowmont Children took place over 50 years ago but continues to haunt Australia. Many familiar with the case continue to hope that it will someday be solved, and that the children, now grown, may even come home one day, but there has never been any progress towards solving this tragic case. The Bowmont children, Jane, Arna, and Grant, were part of a loving and close-knit family living in the suburb of Somerton Park in Adelaide, South Australia. Jim and Nancy Bowmont were devoted parents who provided a warm and nurturing environment for their 3 young children. At 9 years old, Jane was the oldest of the children and was usually responsible for her 2 younger siblings. She took care of them when her parents were away and, even at such a young age, was responsible enough to look over them both. She attended the nearby Forbes Primary School and was known for her gentle nature and love for animals. Arna, at 7 years old, was an outgoing and vivacious child, attending the same school as her sister. She had a bubbly personality and was well liked by her classmates and teachers. Grant, the youngest at 4 years old, was a playful and energetic boy who adored his older sisters. Although too young for school, he was a bright light in their lives, always eager to join in on their adventures. On January 26, 1996, Jane, Arna, and Grant were excitedly heading to Glenelg Beach on their own to celebrate Australia Day. It was a hot day in the Australian summer, and nothing sounded better to the kids than a morning spent at the beach. Nancy believed the children were responsible enough to make it on their own, as they had done before, and allowed them to take the 5-minute bus journey to the beach. The children promised to return by lunchtime. They took the 8:45 a.m. bus to the beach, and had promised to return home on the 12 o'clock bus. But when Nancy went to meet them, they did not disembark. She became worried but thought that perhaps they were having too much fun. However, when the children did not appear on the 2 p.m. bus either, she began to worry. Jim had been away, but when he returned home at 3 p.m., drove down to the beach, which was crowded on the holiday, and began to search for the children. Unable to find them, they started canvassing the neighborhood and asking if anyone had seen them, hoping they had taken a detour to a friend's house. When they turned up nothing, the Bowmonts headed to the police station to report their children missing. Police quickly organized a search of the beach and nearby areas, hoping the children may have either gotten lost in the adjacent area or just simply lost track of time. But with no leads, the fear of kidnapping became more likely. Within 24 hours, the whole nation had heard about the case and was on the look. The case rapidly developed, and authorities were now looking into the idea that a predator had intercepted the children. One woman came forward to say she had spoken to the children near the Patawalunga boat haven on January 29th around 7 p.m. The dock was drained to look for bodies, but nothing was found. Some prime suspects have been identified, but the case has never been closed. One witness believes they saw the children in Collie Reserve, an area near the beach, in the company of a tall man in his mid-30s. Allegedly, the children were playing with him, and was seen walking away with the children around 12:15 p.m. Several months later, another witness claimed to see all 3 children entering an empty house with a man. Over the years, various tips, leads, and possible sightings were reported, both within Australia and internationally. However, none of them yielded definitive answers or led to the discovery of the missing siblings. Number 6. Danielle Imbo and Richard Patrone. A loving couple trying...
I apologize for me having to kiss this girl off camera. My body feels very uncomfortable right now. I'm just trying to get the video done before I figure out what the hell's going on.
To start the lives they had always wanted, Danielle Imbo and Richard Patrone's disappearances shook their community and upended the lives of those who loved them. Danielle Imbo was born on August 7, 1970, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. At 34 years old, she was a mortgage loan processor and the mother of an 18-month-old son. At the time of her disappearance in 2005, she was recently divorced. She was a vibrant and outgoing woman, known for her warm smile and caring nature. Danielle was after a new beginning in the wake of her divorce. She rekindled a friendship with Richard Patrone, a longtime friend, which slowly turned into what her friends and family described as an on-again, off-again relationship. Living in Laurel Hill, New Jersey, Danielle visited Richard frequently in nearby Philadelphia. Richard Patrone, born on September 19, 1967, was raised in a close-knit community in South New Jersey. He was a devoted father and hard-working individual, admired for his sense of humor and genuine kindness. He worked at a bakery owned by his parents, and was a devoted father to his teenage daughter. Things seemed like they were looking up for both Danielle and Richard. Their relationship continued to blossom, and both reported close relationships with family and their respective children. However, on the night of February 19, 2005, everything changed. Danielle and Richard went out for a night on the town with some friends. The pair visited a popular bar in Philadelphia's South Street area, Abilene, enjoying each other's company and the company of their friends. This small restaurant on a one-lane street was the perfect spot to grab a late-night pint. Danielle and Richard left together at about 11:45 p.m., intending to head back to Danielle's place. Little did anyone know, this would be the last time the couple would be seen. The next morning, both families were trying to reach their loved ones. They became worried to the point that Danielle's brother drove to her home to look for her, but she was nowhere to be found. She had missed an 11 a.m. appointment and loved ones were beginning to worry. Richard's family was just as worried. They were planning on watching the Daytona 500 together, something he was looking forward to, but he never showed. It took 1 week for their names to show up in the papers. Their friends had not seen them since they left the bar, and no witnesses came forward to disclose sightings of them afterward. By early March, a reward of $12,000 was offered to anyone with information that could bring them home. But by June, there were no leads. Even after an extensive investigation, nothing was ever found. The car they drove off in has never been identified, and none of the personal belongings they had on them at the time has ever surfaced. In 2018, a development reignited hope for answers. Investigators received a tip about a possible location where Danielle and Richard's remains might be found. A search was conducted, but unfortunately, it yielded no conclusive evidence. If you have information about the case of Danielle and Richard, please contact the Citizens Crime Commission tip line at 215-546-TIPS. Number 5. Lauren Speer. Before she went missing over 12 years ago, Lauren Speer was an enthusiastic young woman ready to take on the next chapter of her life. However, her case has left investigators baffled, with no ideas as to what happened to her. Born to Charlene and Robert Speer on January 17, 1991 in New York, Lauren Speer had a typical American upbringing. After graduating high school in 2009, Lauren began studying textile merchandising at Indiana University.
I think what makes this weird for me and what makes these cases insane is some of these are in their 20s. Like, I'm in my 20s. And to think that, like, at the only age of your early 20s or just late 20s, you could just go missing like that. Snap a finger, gone, out of sight. No one can find you. No one knows where you are, and your family's left wondering for years and years. And the first one, it was a 9-year-old. Like, to think that that can happen is insane on how quickly someone can just be gone and no one knows a thing.
Lauren met her boyfriend Jesse Wolfe years earlier at a summer camp called Camp Towanda. It was also here where she met other students who she would later go on to be friends with at her university. In early June of 2011, Lauren had stayed in Bloomington for a summer course, while many of her friends and the other university students had returned home. On June 2nd, 2011, Lauren went out to a popular local bar, Kilroy's Sports Bar, with some friends and acquaintances. They were drinking and catching up, and Lauren was messaging her boyfriend before he went to bed that night. According to her friends, Lauren was very intoxicated that night. A security camera showed Lauren walking into Kilroy's, where she often met up with friends, at about 1:46 a.m. At 2:27 a.m., she was seen leaving the bar with a friend, Corey Rossman. Lauren left her cell phone and shoes at the bar and was walked to her apartment by Corey. Footage shows her entering her complex around 2:30 that morning. She is visibly intoxicated, and a passerby stops to ask if she's okay. At 2:48 a.m., she was shown to have left her apartment complex with Rossman and enter a nearby alleyway, which she was shown exiting at 2:51 a.m. Her keys and purse were found along the route she took through the alley. She then walked with Rossman back to his apartment, where his roommate tried to convince her to stay the night due to the amount of alcohol she had already had. However, Lauren insisted on returning to her own apartment. Rossman, who was also very intoxicated and stumbling at this point, is helped to bed by his roommate. Rossman's roommate called Lauren's friend Jay Rosenbaum, a neighbor of theirs, knowing he was friends with Lauren, and asked him to come take care of her. Rosenbaum eventually went to collect Lauren and noticed she had a bruise under one eye. She said that she didn't remember how she got it, but presumably had fallen at some point in the night. Around 4:30 a.m., at her own insistence, Lauren left to head back to her own apartment. Several hours later, in the early hours of the morning, Lauren's boyfriend attempted to contact her, but instead received a response from a worker at the bar who found her phone the night before. After not hearing from Lauren and confirming that others had not seen or heard from her, Jesse reported her missing, and the police launched a search. Over 3,000 tips were received by the police department, but none led to Lauren. A number of theories have been considered in this case. Some investigators believe that her disappearance may have been linked to the murder of another student from the university who had gone missing from the same bar. Others wonder if she may have overdosed on drugs or alcohol. However, there is no significant evidence that points to a definitive conclusion in Lauren's case. Despite the determined efforts of law enforcement and the public's unwavering support, the case of Lauren Speer's disappearance remains unresolved. If you have any information about Lauren's case or whereabouts, please contact the Bloomington Police Department at 812-339-4477. Number 4. Natalie Holloway. The case of Natalie Holloway has haunted investigators for more than a decade, forcing them to look into murderers who deny involvement in her disappearance. With no proof and no guilty pleas, her case continues to remain unsolved. Natalie Holloway was an 18-year-old from Mountain Brook, Alabama, a small city just outside of the larger metropolis of Birmingham. To celebrate her graduation from Mountain Brook High School in 2006, where she was an honors student, Natalie and some schoolmates traveled to the Caribbean island of Aruba. Natalie attended an unofficial graduation trip with over 100 of her fellow classmates, intending to enjoy the sun together and some beachside partying before they embarked on their respective journeys. Natalie was slated to attend the University of Alabama on a full scholarship in the fall. According to Natalie's friend Claire Fearman, the trip was everything they had imagined. They spent all day on the beach and enjoyed time together on a beautiful island, meeting new friends and partying into the early hours. One of the major reasons the group had chosen Aruba was because the drinking age is 18, 3 years lower than the legal age in the United States. Many of the graduating seniors could have a legal drink or several in this tropical paradise. The last night of the trip was May 3rd.
I'm glad there's people who get to go on fun things when they graduate. I don't get that look. I just go sit on my ass. That's all I did. And ceremony and all that, even that ain't that fun.
30th, 2005. Many of the vacationers went out to Carlos and Charlie's, a local spot known for its nightlife and fun atmosphere. As the night progressed, Natalie was seen leaving Carlos and Charlie's with 3 young men who were locals on the island, 17-year-old Dutch-born Joran van der Sloot and brothers Deepak and Satish Kalpo from Suriname. The next morning, when the rest of the group were meeting up at the airport, Natalie never arrived. Becoming worried about the young woman, her friends quickly reported her missing, and the investigation began. The details of what transpired after Natalie left the nightclub remain murky and have been the subject of much speculation. According to Joran van der Sloot's initial statements to the police, he claimed that he dropped Natalie off at her hotel around 2 a.m. and that she was intoxicated and stumbled as she exited the car. In the days that followed, Natalie did not reappear, and her family grew increasingly worried.
I would immediately have those 3 men as suspects. You left with 3 tourist men, and you aren't coming back in. You are number 1 suspect, unless there's evidence of you dropping her off and no one else doing anything. You three, that dude and the 2 brothers are number 1 suspects.
Search effort launched involved Aruban police, American law enforcement, and private investigators. Natalie's case garnered international attention, becoming a media sensation that gripped the nation. As the investigation progressed, some sparse details emerged about the night of Natalie's disappearance. Witnesses recalled seeing her in the company of Joran van der Sloot and 2 other men. One major theory is that 1 or more of the 3 men Natalie was seen leaving with may have taken her life. In 2010, Joran van der Sloot stated that he would reveal the location of Natalie's body for $250,000, but it was later determined that the information he claimed to have was worthless. Joran has since been jailed in Peru for killing a college student in 2012, but no concrete evidence has linked him to Natalie's disappearance. Natalie was officially declared dead in 2012, even though her body was never found. To this day, there is no certainty about what happened to her on what should have been a celebratory trip. Number 3. Cynthia Anderson. A case that has stunned investigators since the day it began. Cynthia Anderson's case revolves around a secret admirer and possible stalker. Though there have been a few leads since the day she disappeared, investigators have not been able to solve her case. Cynthia Anderson was a legal secretary living in Toledo, Ohio. She was described as quiet and friendly, and was planning on quitting her job in about 2 weeks to attend Bible college alongside her boyfriend. The 20-year-old was looking forward to entering a new phase in her life, but in the weeks before her disappearance, she seemed haunted. Cindy ultimately disappeared on August 4, 1981, but her ordeal began long before that. About a year before, someone graffitied the building across from her office in large letters declaring, "I love you, Cindy," by GW. She mentioned this incident to a few friends, but ultimately shrugged it off as a possible coincidence. Perhaps someone else was named Cindy. Besides, she didn't know anyone with the initials GW. A few weeks later, writing returned, even more visible than before. Not long after this, an unknown caller started calling her office number to harass her. The office had to lock the door at all times, even during business hours, and an emergency buzzer was put in her desk in case she ever needed it. One day, while sitting with a client in the office, a phone call came in that Cindy answered. According to the client, Cindy listened for only a brief moment and then hung up, turning white as a ghost. The phone rang again, and she quickly hung it up as well. When the client asked if she was okay, as she was clearly distraught, she told them she was fine. However, the client was so disturbed by how shaken Cindy had appeared that he called the police later that day to request a welfare check on her. On August 4th, 1981, Cindy arrived at work as usual at 8:30 a.m. She was usually alone in the early morning hours. Around noon, when the lawyers arrived, Cindy was nowhere to be seen. The door was locked from the inside, but Cindy wasn't there. The office reeked like nail polish remover and all the phones were on hold. Her book was open on her desk, and one colleague observed that the story had been opened to the one violent scene in the novel, about a woman being abducted at gunpoint. Cindy's co-workers were immediately worried and alerted the police, though there were no...
That would be weird. If a person's missing and the book is at the one part, the book she was at her desk is at a part where she, the one violent scene was someone's abducted at gunpoint. Yeah, I'm calling the police. Yeah, that's too weird. That's too suspicious for me not to call the police. That's just weird.
No signs of struggle, and her car was still parked in its space in the lot. Cindy's purse and keys were missing. The police noticed that no calls had been connected after 10 a.m., so they suspected that this would have been about the time she disappeared. They had no leads to go on, but put out alerts through the media and requested that anyone with information about the young woman reach out and let investigators know what they knew. Shortly after Cindy disappeared, police did receive a call. In hushed tones, a woman on the other end of the line requested to remain anonymous. She said that Cindy was alive and was being held in the basement of a white house, but the line went dead before investigators could ask questions or the woman could provide any additional information. Police investigated, but that lead ultimately went nowhere.
What do you do with that lead? It's a white house. You can't go to every white house ass thing because not everyone's gonna be wanting you in there. There's not really much you can do there.
Cindy had no known enemies, and no one had any apparent reason to hurt her. Her bank accounts have never been touched, nor her identity used. The man who wrote on the wall outside her office stepped forward to clear his name months after, claiming his message was for another Cynthia. If you have any information about Cindy's whereabouts, please contact the Toledo Police Department at 419-255-8443. Number 2. Dorothy Arnold. A well-known debutante in the late 19th century, Dorothy Arnold went missing on a typical afternoon stroll in the bustling city of New York, with no witnesses around to bring her mystery a close. Dorothy...
I'm gonna be straight honest. How do you go missing and have no witnesses in New York? How? How do you go missing in New York? and not have no witnesses.
Dorothy Arnold was born on July 1st, 1885 in New York City. She was a socialite and heiress to a very wealthy family. The second child of 4, her father was a perfume importer by the name of Francis Rose Arnold, and her mother was Mary Martha Parks Arnold. All of her siblings grew up to marry wealthy or work in the import business, leading them to more money than they knew what to do with. Dorothy studied at the Velton School for Girls and then Bryn Mawr College in Pennsylvania, where she studied literature. After graduating in 1905, Dorothy lived at the family home on 79th Street and attempted a career as a writer. In the spring of 1910, Dorothy submitted a piece to McClure's magazine, but it was rejected, and her friends and family often teased her about this, finding her aspirations amusing. Many of her future submissions were also rejected, and according to her friends, she was increasingly embarrassed about the lack of success. On the morning of December 12, 1910, Dorothy said to her mother she was off to buy a dress for her sister's upcoming debutante party. Her mother offered to go with her, but Dorothy was insistent on going alone. She left the family home around 11 a.m. with about $25 in cash on her, and walked to the Park and Tilford store on the corner of 5th Avenue and 59th Street. Around noon, Dorothy purchased about a half-pound of chocolate, putting this on her account with the store, and then walked 22 blocks to Brentano's bookstore. Here she purchased a book and conversed with the clerk. None of the store employees she interacted with that day recall anything unusual about her behavior. Outside the store, Dorothy ran into a friend named Gladys King, who remembers Dorothy being in good spirits at the time. Dorothy told Gladys she was going to walk home through Central Park and took off in that direction at around 2 p.m. By the early evening, Dorothy's family was expecting her to return home for dinner, but she didn't show. She never missed meals with her family, and they were worried when she didn't arrive. They called her friends, but no one had seen her. Just after midnight, one of Dorothy's friends called the house to see if she had returned, to which her mother said she had, but that Dorothy had already gone to bed with a bad headache. Fearing that their daughter's disappearance would cause a stir in the media, the family hid it, refusing to even report.
And this is why rich families are also stupid. So they were so concerned about how the disappearance would look in the media that they didn't report it. They didn't report it to police, they didn't report it to anyone. She's just missing and they're not doing anything about it. Because they don't want to be embarrassed. Get the over yourselves.
Report it to the police. They wanted to keep it out of the press in case Dorothy chose to return home in the coming days. Dorothy's family searched her room and found all of her belongings in place, aside from what she had taken to go shopping for the dress. Eventually, the family hired a private investigator who searched nearby hospitals, jails, and even marriage records, but found no sign of where Dorothy had gone. The private detective convinced the family to notify the police, and so they did. On January
Took you long enough, you dumbasses!
February 25, 1911, Dorothy's father held a press conference wherein he informed the public of his missing daughter and asked for their assistance. During the investigation, reporters found out Dorothy had lied to her family before, telling them on occasion she was going out of town, but was actually spending time with a man named George Griscom, but he denied knowing anything about her whereabouts. There were some speculated sightings since her disappearance, and even one letter which showed up at the police station allegedly signed Dorothy that read, "I am safe." However, Dorothy's family never believed she really sent this letter. There is still no answer to what happened to Dorothy on her way home that day, or if she even intended to go home. Number 1. Charles Morgan. The case of Charles Morgan is one of the most mysterious out there. He went missing almost 5 decades ago, and not for the first time. Though his body was eventually found, what happened to him remains a mystery. 39-year-old Charles Curtis Morgan was a businessman in Tucson, Arizona. Known as Chuck to friends, he had his own escrow company and was a proud husband and father to 2 young girls. But Chuck's business life had been going a little off track. He was involved in a land fraud case as a witness to testify against a well-known crime boss. Although he would have rather kept himself out of the mess, he knew he needed to say his piece to help the case progress. On March 22, 1977, Chuck left his house to drop his daughters off at school for the day. His wife waited for him to arrive back home in the evening as usual, but he never showed. Worried, his family contacted the police and they searched for Chuck, thinking he had gone missing. But 3 days later, Chuck found his way home. He only had on one shoe, had plastic handcuffs on his ankle, and his hands were tied with a zip tie. Chuck couldn't speak, but he wrote down to his wife that he was kidnapped, and he wrote that inside his throat was a hallucinogenic drug, and he would die if he swallowed. Then he asked his wife to move his car out of sight from the street so they would not know he had returned home, but who they were remained a mystery to her. Chuck told his wife she would not call the police, and for the next week, she had to nurse him back to health. When his voice returned, Chuck told his wife about an apparent secret identity. According to him, he was a federal agent and claimed he had escaped from his kidnappers somewhere close to Phoenix's Sky Harbor Airport. After returning to normal health, Chuck was extremely paranoid. He wore a bulletproof vest, grew a beard.
This is a guy who's done stuff. This guy who disappeared and, by the looks of it, I'm going to assume, had a mental breakdown. And his mental breakdown caused extreme next level paranoia. That's what I'm going to assume.
Beard to hide his face, and never let his daughters walk to or from school on their own. On June 7th, Chuck disappeared again, this time for longer. For days and weeks no one heard from him, and his family kept hoping he would turn up like the first time, but he never did. Chuck's father did come forward to say his son told him he wrote a letter that was only to be opened if he was ever kidnapped again, outlining who was behind it. But at the time of his final disappearance, the letter could not be located. 9 days after his disappearance, an unidentified woman called Chuck's wife and said, "Chuck is all right," Ecclesiastes 12:1-8, which reference to the Bible passage that reads, "Men are afraid of a high place and of terrors on the road." Only 2 days after disappearing, Chuck was found shot and killed, still wearing his bulletproof vest. He was found 30 feet into the desert, just off the highway. The gun had no fingerprints, but there was gunshot residue on his left hand. In his car was a note in his handwriting outlining the location of the scene, weapons, ammunition, and one of his own teeth wrapped in a handkerchief. There was also a pair of sunglasses that his wife claimed were not his. Strangely, there was also a $2 note clipped to his underwear, and written on it were 7 Spanish names and Ecclesiastes 12, another series of Bible verses. 2 days after his death, a woman called the Pima County Sheriff's Department, claiming she had been to meet him at a motel shortly before he died, and also claimed to be the woman who called Chuck's wife days earlier. According to this woman, Chuck let her see a briefcase of money days before his death, and said this was going to get him out of a contract with the gang. Despite the paranoia displayed by Chuck and all the odd events taking place in his life before his death, there is still no conclusion about how Chuck died, or even whether his death was or the work of another.
These are insane. These are actually insane. Ladies and gentlemen, let me know what you think of these unsolved mysteries in the comment section. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Thank you all for watching. I'll see you all for the next one.